Calculator watches. These are the watches that always get you into trouble when you're 13 in math class, and these are the ones that drives away all of the potential girlfriends when you're 30. Suffice to say, Casio knows what it's doing and how to put the cool on your cuff, but at the same time, we content creators are just making it even worse and irresistible for you out there who is watching. Find out how. It started in 1980 when Casio made its first ever calculator watch, the C80. While it's not the first, it certainly is the most affordable. This gave birth to the Databank series that became the poster child for all things wrist calculated. Casio saw that there is a vast market for these advanced devices on the wrist, and soon it added more functions that can be practical, such as the voice recorder and remote control. This solidly positions Casio as the true mass appeal smartwatch decades before the Apple Watch. Years later, I can now fully understand the reason why Casio is one of the tech giants even today in the era of smart devices. Aesthetic-wise, it really feels original and interesting. It's not just a small slab of screen on your wrist. It's covered with buttons all around its case a Star Trek explorer would be proud of. The owner of this watch may not be a sci-fi nut, but he certainly knows an awesome gadget whenever he saw one. He was happy to lend this one for the channel, and now we can compare it against other G-Shocks I have lying around the table. It's practically the same dimensions as a 5600, so if you can pull those off, you can definitely wear this CMD40. On my 6¼ inch wrist, it fits just right with no overhang with these native straps I installed. Sadly, the original straps for this unit has long since disintegrated, so it will have to make do with this simple strap installation. I feel that this fabric strap also works with the toolish nature of this device. With all of the scratches and age this has on it, this configuration keeps the watch's character. There's so much love in this cool thing that it really pays to restore it in functioning condition. As a restorer of watches, I have the credentials of an unemployed custodian and the steady hands of Tony Stark's receptionist. But even I can easily take the backplate off with the 4 screws and access the module. The module itself has a simple construction with a few screws holding it in place. The battery lid is latched from this area with a small precision screwdriver giving it access. This watch needed just a new battery to breathe life back into it, and this Duracell CR2032 will do the trick. The original spring bars that came with the CMD40 is rather thick and robust. This is much more reliable than many watches you'd find under the $100 price point. However, for this restoration, we'll be using a narrower spring bar setup so that we can fit the double pass NATO. The lug cavity is also rather narrow, making it a bit harder to secure it in place. And finally, the rubber gasket practically is worn out, so the best that I could do is to put it back into place and ask the owner not to get this wet. Now that we've revived this beauty, it's time to put it to work. Operating the CMD40 is actually so intuitive that really I didn't even need a manual to use it. This is of course the product of Casio's conditioning us on how to use their devices. The calculator function is one of the feature cycles that's different from other G-Shocks we've handled. But while the mode button on the side is very easy to press, the calculator buttons are a bit harder to the touch, with it being very stiff. Feature-wise, there's also a difference on the familiar mainstays. The chronograph, for example, just counts up to the second and not the tenths of a second that I'm used to with other modern modules. But hey, it still gets the job done for everyday use, unless if you're a professional nerd of a Rubik's Cube competition. The coolest feature is the remote function of this watch. What makes this stand out is how it's super easy to program. Just press the middle side button to select the learning mode. From there, you can hold the set button to select which button to program. Now you can take most remotes with an infrared emitter and teach the CMD40 its remote code. Simply press the desired button on the watch and you'll see it flash to indicate it's selected. Now press the button from the remote and you'll see the watch indicate that it's receiving the signal. The other remote modes are for specific TV and video player brands, but I'm sure geeks out there will jump right onto the learning mode immediately. Now let's test this 30-year-old watch on our 7-year-old TV to see it in action. I programmed the number buttons as the cursor from our remote. It's so much fun fiddling with this thing, even though the only benefit to me is added style points on a babysitting shift. As you can see, this Casio can smartly select the most dashing watch pirate on the internet while literally pirating the code of this modern day TV. It's simply amazing to think that something Casio produced decades ago can still harmoniously connect with today's devices. No firmware updates needed, no apps to download. And no wonder enthusiasts today are asking for upwards of $700 for a new old stock of one of these. It's not really limited, but it's vintage tech that's being treated as a modern collectible, something that the Apple Watch is yet to be recognized for. There was a time when Japan was the world leader when it comes to cool gadgets and pricing them accordingly to gain mass appeal. Add on top of that the nostalgia that we're now experiencing, and you have this 31-year-old watch that's way too cool for its time, even before Apple had a watch itself. And all that is part of the plan because Casio knows what it's doing. It's all planned out in their blueprint for cool gadgets.